Sky 7 over the scene of what police are now calling a double homicide.
For the first time, California Governor Gavin Newsom has publicly acknowledged that he is open to a run for the White House.
In L.A., homelessness has jumped 16% in a year. Half of Americans living on the streets are in California.
Well, I watched the second California gubernatorial debate last night on April 28th. And 8 candidates, they crammed onto the stage at Pomona College's Bridges Auditorium for what organizers kept calling the most inclusive gubernatorial debate of the entire 2026 cycle. And that's because they insisted on having some of the lowest polling individuals in the Democrat Party on that stage, adding Villaraigosa and adding Thurmond. And it was kind of bizarre because, I mean, it was a bit of a disaster. And the moderators seemed to have self-awareness even before the debate started, basically telling you, there's too many people up there. And, it was like they knew it was a bad idea, that it was going to go south, that it wasn't really going to work. And it didn't really work. But just a bizarre way to introduce, like, here's this wonderful inclusive debate. It's going to be bad, but, here we are. We're doing this anyway for inclusivity. And the inclusivity is about the fact that there was a bunch of hullabaloo for the canceled debate that was supposed to take place at USC a little while back. And, the quote unquote minority candidates in the Democrat Party were throwing a fit saying, we're being excluded, playing race cards or something like that. Anyway, there were 2 Republicans on the stage, Steve Hilton and Chad Bianco again. They were up against the 6 Democrats this time instead of 4, as I said, with the addition of Tony Thurmond and Antonio Villaraigosa, the LA mayor. But look, the whole thing, it was messy from the start. Moderators were constantly cutting mics or threatening to cut mics. People were talking over each other pretty consistently, complaining about their time and so on and so forth. I think it was the first student that asked a question in the audience that effectively said, that was a mess. And that was kind of how this thing went. He wasn't wrong. But even with all that chaos, I mean, I think that something important still came through loud and clear. So there was a brand new CBS YouGov poll just before the debate that showed that 64% of Californians no longer believe the California dream is even attainable anymore. 70% say the cost of living is completely unmanageable. And that was the heavy feeling of disappointment that was hanging over every single question on housing, on gas prices, on insurance, on homelessness, healthcare, education, you name it. But anyway, I'm going to give you straight from the room ranking of who actually won and who lost. So this isn't spin room talk. It's not cable pundit nonsense. This is based on real-time notes that I took there watching the debate on my computer. And so, here's what really went down. And I want to do this by just going through who the clear winners were and the clear losers. Winner number 1, hands down, I believe, was Steve Hilton. Hilton was the strongest. He was the most consistent person on the stage all night. And his best moment, I think, came when Becerra kept trying to blame everything on Donald Trump. And Hilton looked him dead in the eye and said, I think, something to the effect of that's what's wrong with politics in California. These are problems caused by Democrats here. And of course, that's true. And then when Becerra, which was another highlight for Hilton, Becerra wanted to declare a state of emergency to freeze insurance rates, talking about, the issues with home insurance in the state. And Hilton asked him, have you even read the emergency powers statute? You can't do what you are proposing. And Becerra, I'll get to him in a minute, but he was so dictatorial. I mean, no king's protest. I mean, this guy fancies himself a king, but Hilton just got it. He understood the actual rules better than anyone else up there, I thought. And on homelessness, he was tough, but he was humane. Enforced the law against sleeping on streets, mandate treatment for addiction and mental illness, and treat people like we treat our own loved ones. And I think that resonates with people. And on gas prices and the rush to electric cars, he kept calling for common sense instead of ideology. He stayed calm. He was focused on Sacramento's failures, and he never really had a weak moment. So I think he clearly won the night. I mean, from my perspective, if he had a weak moment it was related to some of the questions that were forced about, it operated from this presumption that we have a climate change problem, which is not true. But he didn't really reject that premise completely. He didn't bungle his answer, but he sort of accepted that premise by not really combating the underlying falsehood that we need to solve climate change in California. But anyway, number 2 was Matt Mahan, the Democrat. He was easily the best Democrat on stage, I thought. I mean, his strongest moment was being the only Democrat willing to pledge to suspend and reform the gas tax, calling it regressive and brutal on working families and rural Californians. He got into a little bit more of the, equity aspect again, but, he's a lib, so a progressive. So what can you expect? But he kept coming back to his working class roots. On education, he talked real reforms. He talks about cutting the administrative bloat, bringing back phonics, setting high expectations, rewarding good teachers. So there was a meritocracy aspect to that. He didn't get a ton of time, but he came across pragmatic and solution focused. And, to be clear, both Republicans also strongly supported suspending the gas tax. And this was consistent with the last debate. Antonio Villaraigosa, he was actually pretty solid. Unlike Thurman, who was also added to the stage, Thurman was pretty much invisible. If he hadn't been there, you wouldn't have missed him. But Antonio added something to it. His best moment was showing some accountability that we've spent, Democrats, $24 billion on homelessness, and it hasn't worked. His consistent thing was, we need to do all these different things. And he reminded people about, his record building housing. He said he talked about how he was able to buy a home at 25 and that dream wasn't here anymore. The downside for Villaraigosa is that he still kept falling back on blaming Trump, even while admitting local failure. So he had a little TDS there. Tony Thurman, I guess maybe he had some more moments. He talked about his Panamanian, immigrant mom. He talks about working overnight jobs to put his kids through college. I assume he's working those jobs now. That's what he seemed to claim, that he's working overnight jobs right now. He's the superintendent. I don't know what he gets paid exactly. I would imagine $200,000 plus. But anyway, he pushed down payment assistance grants to help people buy homes. And but his weakest thing is that, education came up. That's literally his job as state superintendent. And he mentioned declining enrollment, but he never explained why it's happening on his watch. He just defaulted to pay it forward free college. So Thurman was pretty weak. He didn't add anything. Katie Porter, I guess she played well to her base. She leaned hard into this theme, right? She's the single mom of 3 teenagers with a minivan. So she's one of us, is what she wants to claim. She was proudly saying, she doesn't have any corporate donations coming in. She's the only candidate to reject those corporate donations. And, her line that the debate was worse than her teenagers or something along those lines, it got a decent laugh. But on policy, unsurprisingly, she struggled. She opposed suspending the gas tax. And this was probably her worst moment. She claimed that refinery workers are dying from pollution, which felt very tone deaf when families are getting crushed by the highest gas prices in the country. And so she's, this green energy nut. Chad Bianco's in the lower middle of the pack, unfortunately. He had some strong lines. One of the most memorable came out of nowhere, which was a little bit odd, but he said the only thing he fears is a Democrat on the stage becoming governor. He was citing some interview he gave before going into the auditorium about, do you fear anything or something like that? He said, no, I don't fear anything. Then he got on the stage and he opened with this line and said, no, actually, the only thing I fear is a Democrat on the stage becoming governor. And that was good. It was raw. I think his strongest moment in terms of giving something to the California voter was he correctly tied the homelessness explosion to post-2014 Democratic decisions that basically decriminalized theft and open drug use. And he called all the Trump blaming ridiculous. But that was also a double-edged sword for him, because that same intensity and prosecutorial tone, especially on that unprompted fear comment, it often came across as overly hostile. So, I mean, it was understandable, but it probably turned off some moderates looking for solutions instead of confrontation. He was very defensive. He came in there just with this kind of attitude. He seemed angry. Now, the clear losers were Xavier Becerra. Becerra had no strong moments. His whole night was weak. It was defensive. And at times it was really disturbing, actually. He kept pivoting everything back to stop Donald Trump. That's his thing. He bragged that he was the only person who's actually run a healthcare system, the largest system in the world, he says. And he wanted to use those emergency powers to freeze insurance rates, an idea that was immediately called out as legally, actually unconstitutional. And when he was challenged, he just doubled down. And his experience claims fell completely flat. Democrats even called him out a couple times. But this is the same guy whose time at the HHS, which he constantly referred to, drew heavy criticism over COVID and the monkeypox response. Bizarrely, Becerra even took credit during one exchange. He said, essentially, you're not worried about catching monkeypox, right? We dealt with these crises. And he boasted that, nobody worries about COVID anymore because we made sure everybody got the jab. And it was defensive. It was out of touch the whole way through. But dead last, number 8, was Tom Steyer. Steyer had 0 strong moments. His performance was extreme. It was disconnected. It was constantly fact-checked, actually, and full of sharp hostility. In the gas prices section, he went after oil companies who already claimed they were jacking up prices. He blamed Trump and the war in Iran again. And he pushed for outsourcing all the refineries. The moderator fact-checked him on the spot about California's refining capacity and pricing realities, and he got called disrespectful. Porter, she's the one who called out his hypocrisy for having made money off fossil fuels himself, which, of course, is an elephant in the room. And he kept repeating that he's the change agent while pushing single-payer, polluter pays, and these radical green ideas. He's the most hostile person to corporations. He's a big government nut. And, Steyer had this aggressive, hostile tone, and it made him the Democrat version of Bianco that night. He was really off-putting. He came across like a completely disconnected, radical green lunatic, while regular Californians are just trying to afford gas and rent. So here's the bottom line from the room in Pomona. I'm sure there are media folks already out there spinning that this was a good night for Becerra's base or, Thurman's warmth, and that's typical post-debate spin. But, my notes from, watching this, I think, tell the real story. Steve Hilton won the night with composure and by actually diagnosing Sacramento's failures. Mahan was the strongest Democrat with real relief ideas. Bianco had good substance, but the tone hurt him. And Becerra and Steyer had the worst nights by far. All blame, all overreach, and all ideas disconnected from reality. And California doesn't need more scapegoats. We don't need more taxes. We don't need more free stuff. A lot of these Democrats up on the stage were just about free. We need more free stuff without acknowledging the fact that, we have this budget crisis. And of course, with every, Steyer's solution is just to keep taxing people. It's insane. But, we need leaders in California that are willing to admit that the one-party supermajority rule has broken the California dream and then actually fix it with gas tax relief, real house permitting reform, enforcing laws, while mandating treatment for homelessness and basic accountability. The June primary is coming up really fast. And from what we saw in Pomona last night, the second debate, I think the choice is very clear again between more of the same and real change. I think that choice has never been clearer. This is Drew Allen with the Daily Signal.